Hello. Anybody have a full plate right now? Like super overloaded? Is your brain maxed out? Do you look like this guy? I feel that way a lot. So, I have a lot going on. I think everybody does. And a lot of times it's hard to keep track of it all. We get into a lack of memory sometimes. It's hard to keep track of all the things that we have to worry about. But I don't think it's always a lack of memory. I think it's sometimes a lack of clarity. So if you've ever gone through your day, and for me personally, in any given day, I have a lot of thoughts, and they're not all of equal quality or value. And you get through your day, and you're like, oh, I'm good. And then, I don't get a lot of sleep. That's my problem. I drink energy drinks here and there, if I'm honest. Okay, 2 a day, just being honest. But, in the afternoons are like, oh my gosh, I can't think anymore. So clarity is really hard to come by. I get in the shower in the mornings, I got this great idea, and it's like, oh, that's perfect. And then you forget about it. It just goes away. And so the problem is we got information overload. We got a lot going on. How many devices do you have? You got a tablet, an iPhone, an Android phone, a desktop, laptop. It really taxes our memory to have so much going on. And if you've got social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, I mean X, whatever that's about. Instagram, Facebook. I have a Facebook account. Every year I log on and say, thanks for wishing me happy birthday. That's about it. So we have forgetfulness. We have a lot of distraction going on. And then there's fragmentation. I can't tell you how many accounts I have. I've got cloud storage and note-taking apps. And I have a work email account and a personal email account. Okay, 3 personal email accounts. David Allen says, remember that your mind is for having ideas, not for holding them. You should be thinking about your stuff, not of it. So what if we could have a system that supports us? A focused, cohesive system that helps us amplify our own strengths, that helps us scale our personal abilities, and then has value that we can lean on over time. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what a second brain is and what it does. We're going to see how you can help focus on your learning, support your curiosity, lean into that clarity because you're spending time thinking, and then lead with confidence because you have this support system that helps you. So what is a second brain? I think at some point they may embed microchips and everybody will be cool with it, but right now a lobotomy doesn't sound appealing to me. So it's not a chip in your brain, it's a second brain, and that is a digital personal knowledge management system. A lot of what I'll be talking about today is based on a book called Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. And he's done a lot of work to distill the concepts of how you can set up applications that work together to help you remember, to help you track what you're doing. So we'll talk about his material a lot. And what we'll learn is some simple steps to get started and some mindset changes in how you think about the information that you interact with. So how we'll get there is we'll talk about why you want one, the motivation. I'll give you a model of how to think about it, and then we'll look at the mechanics of particular applications. James Clear, a Columbus native, has a very good book. It's called Atomic Habits. And he says, you do not rise to the level of your habits, you fall to the level of your systems. I'm not great at changing my habits. I just discontinued Nutrisystem because I wasn't doing it. The candy bars were cool and all, but right? Or exercise programs or all these things, they're habits. And it's really hard to change and do these things that you're not comfortable with. So if you build a system like a second brain, it's going to support you in certain areas. Now, who needs a second brain? I need a second brain. I'm sure some of you would agree with that. Maybe you're just curious about what that is. But as knowledge workers, we deal with information all the time. And we're not working on an assembly line where we can just punch the next widget and then have it move down the line. A lot of the time, we're making decisions about how to approach our work, how to manage it, and how to decide what the next thing is. Maybe you're in a Scrum shop developing software. Okay, they got a Jira board. It's not stickies anymore because we're all remote or dispersed maybe. But anybody that's got basic knowledge tools today can benefit from such a system. One thing that I think it's really good at is helping with imposter syndrome, because once you start to track your information, you can track things that you've accomplished. That's going to help you realize what you've done and tell other people about it. You can develop a personal brand. Here's a few things that I like to do with my second brain. Kind of silly maybe, but I track my favorite foods at restaurants. When I go to Dirty Frank's downtown, okay, I don't have to put that in my system. I already know what my favorites are. It's Puff the Magic Popper. It's a hot dog with cheddar cream cheese, bacon, and jalapenos on it, so pretty awesome. But, I like to save what I like when I go to restaurants. My original jokes, I've got a few. Oh, I've got one about bacon too, so I think you're going to pick up on a theme there. When I interview candidates for jobs, I track it in my second brain. My medication, when I go to the doctor or a new doctor, because they keep moving me around, I have my medications that I track. I track tasks. So you're like, probably by now you're like, wait, this is a note-taking talk? Snooze, right? Okay, I gave this talk yesterday at Toastmasters, and they said, you need to have a little bit more enthusiasm when you talk about it. So unfortunately, I'm not like Steve Ballmer, where he's like, oh yeah, note-taking. It's not quite that exciting, maybe, but I think if you look at it, you'll start to see the potential. And maybe you're thinking, well, why do I need another system? It sounds like a hassle. But I want to tell you that the effort is manageable, and you don't need to worry too much about it. Now, with ChatGPT and all this AI stuff, you might ask, well, doesn't AI make all of this obsolete? Why do I need a note-taking app when I can just ask Google or ChatGPT for the answer? And I think that's going to change a lot of things, and some of the techniques that you'll see today actually can offer you AI solutions. So let's talk about the model. Building a second brain offers two key principles. One is called CODE, C-O-D-E, it's an acronym. And the second one is called PARA, P-A-R-A. We'll look at those in a moment. The CODE process talks about the full range of how you engage with your information. First is capture, second is organize, then you have distill, and finally express. From the point of capture, where you're collecting information, to how you keep track of it with organizing, and then what you do with that information to better understand it, and distilling it, and then making things out of it, that's expression. The first step is capture. Now, some of you might, anybody got more than 20 browser tabs open at one time? Anybody? Any of you really hate rebooting because you lose all your browser tabs when you reboot? I happen to know how to stop Chrome, and after I reboot, have it open up all the tabs again, which I don't know if that's healthy or not. But, you want to capture that information, and we'll look at how to do that. Clarity is so valuable. And when you get that clarity, you want to preserve it. You want to get it down and capture it. Organizing, Tiago Forte recommends organizing based on the action you're going to take on the information. And so when you save it, actionability is going to be really important. He's also written a book called The Para Method, where he digs into that. Let me explain that really quickly. Projects is the P. Areas is areas of responsibility. Resources and archives. Projects are very obvious. It's a goal with an end date. It's something that you're going to keep track of information for a certain period of time, but you've got some kind of end in mind. Then areas of responsibility, these are things in your life that have a certain level of quality or a standard to maintain. So if you talk about health or career or those type things, that's going to be an example of an area of responsibility. Resources, I don't know. Anybody use Humble Bundle? Any Humble Bundle buyers? Every few months I'll get a Humble Bundle, and it says if you give a certain minimum amount of money, you can download all these PDFs for books I will probably never get to read. But, I figure I can get that information. So resources are an example of just the information about topics and reference that you want to keep. And finally, archives is for information that you want to keep around, but you don't want it in your face. So based on these para categories, projects, areas, resources, and archives, I'm going to give you a few examples, and it's time for you to see if you can recognize what it is. First is throw a birthday party. What do you think that is? Is that a project, an area of responsibility, resource, or archive? Anybody? Project, right? It's got a specific date. When it's over, it's over. What about Stir Trek Conference? We're here at Stir Trek. What do you think that is? It depends, right? If you're a conference organizer, it might be an area of responsibility. If you're going to attend it, it could be a project or a resource. It might be a resource after you attend it. Health and wellness, I think that's probably an area. Java tools, what do you think? Resource, okay. All right, usage of Java tools at work. That's probably documentation, and you've got a guide, so I'd say that's a little resource. What about learn Python programming? Project, very good. Plan a vacation is another example. Personal finances, that's probably an area of responsibility. But here's the big one, best dad jokes of all time. Resource. If you're really into it, it might be a project, right? You're trying to write some jokes. If you feel like that's, you're supposed to be funny all the time, that's an area of responsibility. But, if they don't go over well, then you should probably just archive it. So. All right, so let's look at the mechanics. The core of your second brain is really your note-taking application. So here are a few examples. Who in here sees at least one up there that you use? A lot of hands, right? OneNote, Evernote, Notion, Apple Notes, Obsidian. Now, I'm an Apple user. I wasn't always, but you'll see some Apple references in my material. I begrudgingly joined. I still think they're elitist, but I have one, so I'm probably one too. So, Obsidian. Any Obsidian users in there? Love it? Hate it? Love it. Awesome. Someone that we know and is probably speaking here today, Matt Eland. He loves Obsidian, and I'll mention a little bit more about that. Okay, so which one is best? I mean, you might have your opinion, and you probably have one that you currently use. But the real answer is there is no single best tool. In fact, it's probably a combination of tools, and each one is good at what it does. It's cloud storage and note-taking application and task manager. You've got all these things that have to work together. It's an ecosystem that completes your second brain. Tiago Forte on his blog, it's buildingasecondbrain.com. He has an article that says, here's how you choose a second brain app. And so it's a great resource, and it'll walk you through his criteria for what's a good one and what things you need to look for. I happen to use Notion a lot, so one of the things I like about it is it's got really rich editing tools. Anybody use Notion? All right, a couple woos. Anybody been disconnected from the internet and go, wow, Notion doesn't work very well? I know that's true. It's got rich editing tools. There's structured metadata. You can create databases that are pages and add properties to them. It's really flexible. A lot of customization that you can do. And it's got, it's very self-contained, so you can save information and just work out of the app. You've got team collaboration features. There's a lot of integrations. I have several that I lean on, and there's a lot of templates. For example, you can see here, here's a ready-made template that's got, it shows it on the mobile app as well. It's a very good mobile experience. And if you've never checked them out, there are a couple people on YouTube that are very good at Notion, Thomas Frank and Marie Poulin. They both have very good material, so if you're into Notion, I highly recommend them. So the mechanics of capture, we talked about that it's important to capture that stuff. So what goes in a second brain? Project notes, quick notes if you just want to jot something down. I listen to a lot of podcasts. It keeps my mind busy while I'm mowing the lawn, while I'm driving. Of course, now my 5-year-old wants to help me mow. So I can't really listen to podcasts because he wants to get in right behind the handle and help me push the mower. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll wait until he's bored with mowing and then I'll hit the podcast again. But it's a lot of fun. Web clipping. I mean, everybody uses the web, and how many times have you found a page and you don't have time to really absorb it right away? We've got ebooks. I read Kindle. In fact, if I really like a book, I'll get it on Kindle, Audible, and in print because I like to really absorb it. One thing that Tiago Forte recommends as kind of a filter with your second brain is a read later app. Instapaper, Pocket, those are a few examples. One of the services that I use has its own. And what that gives you is a way to, using a browser extension, you can save articles in a list that you want to read later. And the reason that you want to do that rather than just directly sending things to your second brain app is because you can accumulate a lot of information. And you need that filter that says, okay, not everything that I have on the web is worth saving, or at least not integrating into your knowledge base. My favorite podcast ever, or podcast app ever, is called Snipped, S-N-I-P-D. Anybody use that? Oh, good. So this is new to you. Okay, a couple people. Snipped is awesome because it allows you, I don't know how many times over the years I've been listening to a podcast, I'm like, oh, that's really good stuff. How do I capture that moment? And for many years, you just couldn't. You're like, okay, I'm going to wait until I get home to write it down or whatever. And usually that wasn't happening because you just forget. Snipped allows you on your Bluetooth device, like earbuds or in my car, to hit the rewind button, and right at that moment, it will take like a 1-minute snip of that podcast. It's got AI features in it, so it can capture a transcript of that snip. Now, they've changed the model a little bit, so you get a couple of those for free, and then you have to pay for the rest of the features, but I highly recommend that one. In fact, I got a report back at the end of the year. It was saying, hey, here are your stats for the year. And I wasn't expecting it, but it popped up. And it told me that I was in the top 0.7% for how many snips I had taken. And there's a secret to that, because when I'm listening into the car, my left thumb up on the steering wheel is right by the rewind button. So I'm listening in the car, I'm driving down the road, and it goes, boop. So somehow I accumulated a lot more than most people. So Snipped integrates with Readwise and Notion. So in my Notion application, when I take snips, it will actually keep links and it will keep an inventory. It's got a nice database in there. I can show you that a little bit later. Now, when you read, you probably don't retain as much as you'd like. I know I don't. And so there's something called the forgetting curve that talks about the amount of things that you remember as time passes. And so really, reading more is not so valuable as remembering more. And so I use a service called Readwise. Any Readwise users? One? Awesome. So what Readwise does, the primary function is it will take your Kindle highlights, your ebooks, and it will extract those, and then on a periodic basis, usually daily, it will send you 5 selections of your highlights for you to review. And so what you get is spaced repetition. So a book you read 6 months ago that you've kind of forgotten, it's going to bring it up. Now, I do happen to do it a lot. My current streak, that number is out of date, but they do allow you to make up time. So I'm not doing it every day, but you can do a few days back. But I've moved on the leaderboard from the 1400s down into the high 800s. So I'm a little bit proud of that accomplishment, but it also means that I probably have a personal problem. So this one is the Reader app. And one of the things that it will allow you to do is read web pages to you. We'll see if the audio works.
If you've decided to follow my advice and create your very own personal system of knowledge management, which I call a second brain, then your first step is to decide which app to build it on. Your note-taking app is the core of your second brain, the central place where you store your most important information and use them to do your best work.
So that's an example of how you can have it read the articles to you. I mentioned Instapaper. I think Instapaper does have some text-to-speech, but the voice is pretty good. I like it. It allows me to unplug a little bit, like if I'm just wanting to, not focus on it and read it directly. It does move the highlight as it reads to you, so that's pretty cool. One other thing that it lets you do is you can actually take highlights from inside the text of the web page that you've extracted, and that integrates into Readwise as well. Now, we talked about Para, and Tiago Forte says that you can set up the basics of Para in about 60 seconds. Now, I think that's probably more of a clickbait marketing enticement, but getting started is pretty easy. So the first thing you're going to do is, in whatever tool you're using, you're going to archive everything. And I think people are probably like, what? But if you think about it, the efforts that you've done so far in these tools might be a little cluttered. And so you can take a fresh start, and the first thing you do is create an archive folder. It could be on your desktop if your files, or in your OneDrive or Google Drive or Dropbox. Just take your existing information, create a folder with today's date, and move it. And then pause. Take a breath. You're like, okay, I'm nervous, but this could be good. What it does is it just gets it out of your way. The next thing you need to do is set up a project list. You're probably going to have about 10 to 15, maybe 20. And that list will give you an idea of what folders you need to create. And then there's the folders that you need to create called Para, in the Para acronym, and that's where you start. So then you create your first project folder, and we'll look at a few examples. This is Para in action. I've kind of selected a few characters or persona, if you will, that embodies someone that might be interested in a second brain and what they might need from it. So this is Samantha. These are fictional characters, of course, but you might identify with their situation. She's a career changer. She's breaking into tech. She's in an industry where there's a lot of disproportionate demographics. A lot of men and women in tech are starting to grow. But, she faces things that are distinct for her needs. And so what I want to look at is Samantha and what she might have in a para setup. Now, I've left the archives out of this picture, but projects, let's say learning AI, like that's a hot topic. That's something she wants to learn. Apply for a promotion. Leadership, networking, women in tech, those are all areas that she would be interested in. And machine learning, that's a topic. It's related to AI, but she might have references on that, resources. Swaroop has started at a new company. He's got a wife and kids, a couple of aging parents, family concerns. So for Swaroop's projects, you might see, hey, I'm moving to my new city, or I need to find some assisted living for my parents, or maybe they live together and there's other needs. I like to create my company as an area of responsibility. Parenting, elder care, those are another set of areas. Or if the children are in sports, there's soccer information or cricket, if you will. DevOps, for instance. Trevor is a college student, and he's a junior, and he's just getting started. So maybe his projects are applying for internships, or his field of study is an area. He also likes music, so music information, and then resources on his subjects. And he might be interested in using OneNote. Maybe he gets a OneNote Office subscription through his school. And as you can see up here, you've got some examples of the folder structure, projects, areas, resources, and archives. Okay, now here's James. James has been in the industry for a while. Let's say more than 20 years, 20 plus. Seasoned professional. He's a mentor to younger people coming into the field, but suddenly he finds himself just laid off. And I know what this is like. Some friends of mine recently were in this situation. And so he's got all this experience and he's giving back, and yet suddenly he finds himself out of a job. So James, his projects might be searching for a new job. He's got a career area, talking about his skills. And then the mentoring program that he's part of is another area for him. Resources might be vacations that he wants to take or retirement plans. Now, going back to the CODE acronym, we've just come through organize and looked at those mechanics with PARA, projects, areas, resources, and archives. CODE is the outer model: capture, organize, distill, and express. Distill involves taking the information that you've collected. It's one thing, I collect a lot of information, but it's still another activity entirely to take that information and make sense of it, to integrate it. You've got areas, projects, resources. That's where you start. But then as you work with your information, you're going to look at it, you're going to read it, and there's a process involved in doing that, and that's what Tiago Forte calls distill. He has a technique called progressive summarization. I think this is a really clever way to work with your information over time so that you don't have to front load all of your work. And you're basically making it more discoverable for yourself in the future. And this illustration is one that shows his process. The first thing that you do is just capture it. You don't need to take a lot of notes on it. You just get it and you save it. But when you come back into that information, let's say it's a web clipping, you don't want to reread the entire thing the next time. So what you're going to do is as you reread it, you're going to look for things that stand out. And all you do is you bold those things. Every keyboard, every word editor, bold is a basic functionality. When you come back to those things in the third pass, you're going to highlight stuff. So if it's got a little highlight function, but here's the trick. You're only going to highlight within what you've already bolded. So you can see with this picture that it tapers as you go up. So you're progressively summarizing. And then the next time you're in a particular one, you're not doing this for everything. You're only doing it for the information that you access a lot. So the next time you're going to write a little summary at the top. And Notion actually, it's got AI features and can summarize things for you. So that might be an option too. But every time you work with that information, if it's high value information, you're going to be refining and getting clarity on what that means. And then finally, layer 5 is you build something out of it. There's a phrase that says you only know what you make. So that's a good way to learn. So these things are part of the distill process. And then finally, express, you're going to make something out of that. Now that could be a presentation, it could be writing code, it could be giving a talk. Or if you're an influencer, I don't know if we have any influencers in the room, I'm certainly not one of them. But clarity comes through expression. You can reflect on the information that you've taken in and what you've been thinking and the notes that you've been building. But it's really key that when you start to make something else, there's an author that says, I don't write what I think. I don't write what I think. I write to know what I'm thinking. One thing Tiago recommends is that you go offline. When you're getting ready to build something, take your second brain, shut everything off. Just focus on that. So he says, don't start with Google because as you start to create something, you're not diverging to take in more things. Your second brain allows you to converge and stop with that. So don't go to Google because as we know, Google spelled backwards is actually rabbit hole. And if you translate that into German, I think it's distraction. So your second brain allows you to never start from scratch. You're always building on information that you have. And so you've got a resource to mine and to fuel that content production that you're making. Things that you've built in the past, he calls those intermediate packets. They're work that you've done before. They're kind of like building blocks. Things like notes you've already distilled and outtakes from work you've already done. Work in process, things you've delivered. And sometimes when you're making a presentation or a document, there's things that you can't really fit in. But that's okay because your future self can still make those into other things. I'm going to show you an example of one of my second brain applications. I have multiple. At work, I use OneNote, and it's not my tool of choice, but everybody's got an Office subscription, and it comes for free. And a lot of companies, like the clients that I work for, they block Notion. I don't know why. I get it. They don't want me putting secret information on the web or in my notes. So I have a OneNote for my personal, a OneNote for my consulting company, and a OneNote at my client. And then I have Notion, and then I have Apple Notes. You can see how this goes. Okay, so here's an example of para in structure. I've given talks at different places. There's any jobs that I looked at, my annual review, those are all projects. And so I can look at things that I've recorded, things that I've done. There's something called a brag book. A brag book is something that you track your accomplishments. And it's great for annual reviews, for reminding you of what you've done, building resumes. And it's also a means of giving yourself confidence, knowing what you've accomplished. You can say, you know what, I may have imposter syndrome, but look, I haven't done nothing. I've done all these things. So this is a great way to use that. Areas, we've got medical, vacation travel, networking, conferences I attend, book notes for resources, and of course the archives. One thing Tiago Forte recommends is not creating empty folders. Never create a folder in your organization tool with just the intention to put something there. Only create a folder when you have something to put in it, because you want to organize your stuff in a way that it's not just, when you're on a team, if you're doing organization that way, you can have people that go, oh, look, there's the documentation. Oh, it's an empty folder. It's kind of disappointing, right? So you want to only create what you need when you need it. And so that's why the 60-second setup concept is fairly close, right? So when you set up your folders, if you go in the para order, those are the top level folders. You don't have, in Evernote, when I used it before para, my folder list was about that long. And this allows you to clean it up, and it keeps your mind focused on, is this actionable? Is it something that I'm going to be using immediately or not? And so as you create resources, as you gather information, you're going to be starting with these top level things that's going to make you ask that question. Another recommendation, a quick tip, is that you should create an inbox. And when you capture things in your second brain, you shouldn't worry too much about where it goes at that moment. If you've got a note and you want to capture it right then, don't worry about whether it's a project or an area or whatever it is. Just get it down. If I'm on my phone and I want to do a recording, I just hit my watch. I say, oh, I've got this great idea. I'm not interested in going, okay, let me get my keyboard out and file this thing. So what that takes is some discipline, and it's not a lot, but when you get these things in this inbox, that's the starting point, you do need to go back and look at it and do something with it after a while and decide where to put it. How many of you use OneNote? Handful? Has anybody seen the Office integration that allows you to send email from Outlook on the desktop to OneNote? Send to OneNote is fantastic. In fact, a couple of clients that I've worked at have very stringent retention policies. And they delete your email after anywhere from 2 years to 60 days. 6 months. So if I have an email that I want to save, that's a fantastic way to do it, is you just, you send it to OneNote, and it creates a page out of it. OneNote also has tagging features. It's not like tagging in other tools, but it does allow you to do some cool things. Like I have one that lets me, show you that one. Okay, so these are follow-up tags. You can see to do, the one that I customized is activity record. So as I'm going down through these notes and making observations and recording things, I can say activities for the week. And let's say I've got a story to finish. And I do that. Well, suddenly I've got this accomplishment that I did. I did a code story. If I tag that with this activity record tag, now I can go back, and OneNote actually allows you to do something pretty cool. It's got this find tags feature. And so you can go by tag name, you can scope it to a particular area, so this notebook. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look down through here. So activity record, it'll help me navigate there. So if I'm somewhere else and I go back to story, I can do that. And now there's a really cool feature called create summary page. So if I want to collect all those things, it will create a summary out of all those tags, and there's my status report for the week. So that's OneNote. We've got Notion. I don't know if my internet access is going to work completely, but so here's some example of some of the project structure. I did a workshop for building a second brain a year ago, and you can see I've got some the standard pair of folders over here. And it's recommended to put a number in front of them because if it sorts alphabetically, PARA becomes AAPR. It's almost AARP, but you know, that might be an area for some of you. No offense, I'm getting there. You know, I'm creeping up on 50, so I'm expecting that postcard in the mail. So Notion is pretty cool. You can create databases, and these databases allow you to have different properties. Now you can skip the database feature if you want in OneNote or Notion, but it's really powerful. It allows you to create things like Kanban boards, different views of information. You've got different properties that you can create. I've got images here. Let's see if the gallery works. Okay, that's not working. You've got a list of images, for instance. There's several views that you can use. Calendar, timeline. So it's really rich functionality. It's great at embedding media. I think the free account limits it to 5 megabytes for an upload, but I've done all of this using the free account, so it's very generous. The AI features, it will offer you to summarize information. It can start writing. Slideshow back here. Okay, so we saw a few examples of note-taking applications. We talked about other integrations that you can do, the types of information that you'll put in there, why you would want it. It serves a valuable purpose. And you can take some of that load off your mind. You can lean on it for giving your mind a break. That second brain, a lot of people talk about, I hear these entrepreneurial podcasts talk about, you need a virtual assistant. And I'm like, I can't take a remote virtual assistant to my client and say, I'm going to let them handle my email. I mean, as much as I'd like to, I would love to do that, but So we looked at the model, organizing for actionability. Is this a project? Is it an area of responsibility? Is it a resource that I need? And then we looked at how to capture things, how to use applications like Snipped, a read later app, or a tool like OneNote or Notion and Obsidian or Apple Notes. The one thing that is really important is you get some value increased over time. And the more that you put in this, the more it's going to give back to you. And as you pick a tool, you're going to want to give it enough time. There's a lot of cool tools out there. As I said, Tiago Forte has one about how to pick it out. But one thing he'll tell you is don't just use it for 3 days and then go to the next one. We can use it to track our learning. That's our curiosity. We can use it to refine our thinking. That's the clarity that we need. And then we can use it to prove to ourselves that we've done things, and we can show that to other people. Building a resume, going to your next performance review, that's going to give you the confidence that you need. So imagine having these tools at your disposal. Imagine being able to lean on these things with the clarity that you have and being able to give your brain a break and envision what you can create out of it. The biggest difference between the person who lives his or her dreams and the person who aspires is the decision to convert that first spark of action or that first spark of motivation into immediate action. So what I would encourage you to do is to take these things that I've presented, and if you're not using them already, put something in there, start thinking about what you want to accomplish, and pick a tool. Pick your tool. If you haven't started with one, I would definitely say consider offline experience. That's important. Notion is very cool. I like it a lot. Set up Para. You're going to break it down into the projects, areas of responsibility, resources, and archives. And give it at least 30 days. Give it at least 30 days to see what happens. And then share it, what you learn with someone else. You know, you can hit me up on LinkedIn and tell me what you discovered, tell me what you like. But share with somebody that you know what you've learned. And then go make something great. Thank you. Questions? Any tools you like? Question? Well, yeah, so when you're using multiple apps, one of the things that Para is great at, I even use it in email. So Tiago Forte recommends using the same structure and the same naming conventions across all your tools. So at least when you're looking for what you're using, you already know what it's called. And so you're, okay, this is a project, I know where it's at. I do Para in my OneDrive. I do Para in Outlook. I don't do it in Gmail. It doesn't really work well for that. But it depends on the context. So when I'm at work, I'm using my client OneNote. That's all I need. So I actually don't use Obsidian personally. I haven't tried that one yet. I mentioned some colleagues that really like it. I think he backs it up to GitHub because it's all text-based content. And it allows you to draw on connections and see related information. That's something that a second brain is really good at, is allowing you to discover things that you didn't really see the first time. Any other questions? Yes?
Yeah, Jeffrey, thanks. So if you have a resource that's part of a project, what would you do with that?
So the question is, if you have a resource that's part of a project, what do you do with that? Depending on the tool that you're in, and its mechanism for placement, sometimes you can link a resource from another place. So you can copy and then paste the link in your project to the information. If you're using a really basic tool that is location-based, it's folder-based, sometimes it may make sense to move that information into the project folder. And you should really keep your information moving. It will serve as a resource later when you come back to it. It's not knocking on your door or tapping you on the shoulder saying, hey, come look at me. But if you structure it the right way and you use it the right way, it's always going to be there for you when you come back to it. So if you keep your information fresh by keeping it moving, say you take your learn Python information and you're actively pursuing that, you might move the Python information into the project. But if it's a tool that supports linking, kind of like a wiki, right? You can say, okay, I can link to this resource and then just reference it as I need it.
And do you know of any plugins or ways that you do this in Microsoft Teams? They're all
Okay, so Microsoft Teams, the question is there anything that could do that in Microsoft Teams? So Microsoft Teams, you can embed OneNote. So it's got the apps that plugs into Teams. I've done that. You can add it to a Teams channel. So you can put a OneNote add-in in a Teams channel. There are other integrations to other applications as well. Anybody else? Question? The question is, do I have any recommendations for to-do lists and organizing daily tasks? Unfortunately, fragmentation is just a big deal. I've got tasks at work. I've got tasks, there's like a Jira board. There's a million places I have to track this. But what I recommend is having, at least for your personal stuff, a dedicated task manager. One thing that I did recently in using Notion is I retired my task manager app and attempted to use Notion's database features to create a sort of a task management structure. And there are plenty of videos on YouTube on how to do that. Thomas Frank has some good material on that, and Marie Poulin as well. But as far as task management, I think a Second Brain supports that. You definitely need to have that as a dedicated function. So your task manager and your note-taking application work together. Is there one that you've used personally? You want one, but you don't have one. I've used Nosebe, Nozbe, and I used that for a lot of years. There's a lot that are organized around the getting things done methodology, and that is one of those. But one thing that Notion is very good at is you can create database views and then drop those in dashboards. So it does have some advanced layout capabilities as well. The question is, have I tried the Notion question and answer chatbot? I have not. I have tried out the AI features like summarization. I think I don't know if it will give you a few for free, but it is a feature that you have to pay for. So I know that it can, one of the cool things that the Notion AI can do that I've seen recently is it can take content that you already have and create tags for it automatically. So if you've got the tags field and you want to categorize it, it'll just say, go through all of it and figure out what the tags are. That's pretty cool.
Because I've been using it, and what's really cool about it is it actually allows you to, it embeds all of your data in a vector database, and essentially allows you to use natural language to query all of your notes in one big data lake and respond with relevant information and the links to those references.
Does it include citations by default?
It does.
That's nice.
I've been using it all the time, and I just
Yeah.
recommend trying it out.
So the Notion Q&A is something that I want to check out, and it's really cool that it actually is based on your own content. That's an important aspect, is that your own knowledge base is really the essence of what you're worried about. You don't want to have ChatGPT going out and telling you things that you don't really care about, but when you integrate it with the question and answer feature, it's looking at your notes and integrating that into its responses. That's pretty cool. All right, thank you for being a great audience. I wish you all the best of luck in your quest for second brain and knowledge gathering. And if you have any questions, you can see me after. Thank you.